Hi, I'm so glad you're here. This is Jennifer. So today I'm going to kind of take you along as I create a bunch of cards using an amazing new product release. And as we create these cards, I'll share with you my thoughts on rethinking our supplies. We invest a lot of money in this hobby of ours, so we want to make sure that when we purchase something, we can use it in many ways. And that's what we're going to talk about today as we make these cards. Now, this is a new release from Concord 9th, and it is one of the strongest holiday releases I've ever seen from a company. I just think every product is really well thought out, so I thought it'd be fun to make cards using all of the products and share those tips along the way. Because I have so many cards to share, I will only be sharing bits and pieces of each card, but please know you can go to my blog for photos and more information. All right, let's get started with this card, and then I'll show you two more where I stretch the supplies and use them creatively to get different looks. This is the Concord 9th Nordic Noel die set. You get all the dies that you see here, including those little dies that cut lots of little pieces that you can use to inlay in the openings of the word Noel. I'll demonstrate that. But what's really brilliant about this is Concord 9th has the Nordic Noel enamel shapes. And these little shapes fit into the openings on the word Noel too. And they have some dimension and shine to them. So you could use either die cut shapes or these enamel shapes to fill it in. And the enamel shapes look really cool. I just think this is a brilliant way that they offer different options to us as crafters. Okay, so let's get started by assembling some pieces. I have the shadow cut from a light color cardstock and the word Noel cut from a darker color cardstock. And I'm gluing those pieces together. This is just one layer thick. For this card, I'm really assembling it kind of how this die set was originally intended to be done to create this Noel that's layered and fill in those little spots. But then we're going to stretch it on the next example. I think sometimes it's best to use a supply how it's intended to get used to it. And while you're creating with it, you can get ideas for other cards too, which I'll do in the next two examples. Here I'm putting those little enamel shapes into the openings. You can see how well they fit and they give great dimension and shine. I'll show you a close-up look in a moment. After you fill in the openings, you could leave this as is, just one Noel die cut thick, but you know me, I love stack dimension. So I cut two more Noel die cuts and glued them together. And now I'm gluing them right on top of our assembled piece. So those enamel shapes be kind of be set back, but you'll still be able to see the dimension and shine inside. Totally up to you if you add that additional dimension. Thanks to those self-adhesive enamel shapes, this was pretty quick to pull together. Now for a background, I'm using an older die from Concord 9th that is absolutely brilliant. This is the double stripe card front die. It looks a little silly, but it allows you to create this faux stitch stripe pattern either horizontal or vertical on a card panel. So here I'm taping it in one position. This is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece, and I'll run that through my die cut machine like you would any die. And there you can see the faux stitch pattern. Now I'm going to tape it back onto the same die, but in the opposite orientation. So that's why the die is shaped a little oddly. And we're going to tape it here and run it through again. This will put stripes in the opposite direction. And because I did both, I have this plaid background. So you could do stripes in one direction, stripes in the other direction, or do both for this plaid. All right, so I trimmed that background down and I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card, and I added our layered Noel piece on top. You can see those enamel shapes and the dimension and shine they offer. In the other little holes, I put a tiny little gemstone for even more sparkle. While I created this card, which was pretty straightforward to put together, I thought of other ways to use it, and one of those ways was to unstack the letters so it reads Noel across a card, so we'll do that next. I cut the shadow from red cardstock and the word Noel from white. I cut the no from the L in each case so that they would be separate and we could put them next to each other instead of stacked. So I have the white on top of the red here. It's just one layer of white cardstock, and I'm popping in those little enamel shapes. Again, if you don't have the shapes, you can see the little dies there that quickly cut a bunch of the little shapes to pop in with cardstock if you want, or even glitter cardstock. I did that for both the no and the L, and now I'm adding on top of it a stacked white and gold die cut. That just gives some dimension and some shine right on top. I wanted something subtle for the background since the Noel is so bold, so I chose the Concord 9th Snowfall card front die. This die is fantastic because it does a piercing pattern but does not have an outside cutting edge. So there are many ways you can use this creatively. So we're going to rethink this A2 size die and use it on a 5x7 card. So this is one of those times where I think about a product when I buy it, like this one, and I think of many ways to use it. Because there's no outside cutting edge, I'm able to use it on a bigger piece of cardstock. So I run it through my die cut machine once, just like a regular die, on half of the cardstock panel, and then I shift it over and run it through again. This is a 5x7 piece of cardstock, and I was able to do that pattern on the entire thing, even though the die was smaller. You could even use this directly on a card front. So I have glued this 5x7 piece down onto a 5x7 note card that I created, and now it's time to stamp a sentiment on it. I'm stamping it right below where I will place the E and L on my card. Now I'm stamping this with black ink onto a textured background. Remember, there's that pierced pattern. So there will be little piercings that the black ink doesn't reach to, so it shows up white. All I do is I take a fine tip black pen and fill those in. I could have stamped this first before doing the piercing, but I honestly didn't think about it at the time. I did cut the bottom of that card off so that it would be about 3 3/4 inches tall by 7 inches wide. Now my 5x7 envelope is a little bit big for that. So what I like to do is cut off part of the bottom. So I'm just cutting a little bit off, and then I will reseal the bottom of my envelope. Now this 5x7 envelope is about 4x7, and my card will better fit in it. So don't be afraid to change your envelope size, and don't be afraid to create cards that aren't your typical A2 or 5x7 size. Again, this is 3 3/4 by 7. All right, so here's a look at the completed card. You can see the gold shine on top and also the domed shine of those enameled pieces that we put inside of the openings. You can also see the piercing texture on the background, which adds some subtle interest. I like that this card looks very different than the last card we did. So I was able to stretch my supplies, rethink them a bit, and get a different look. Let's do a third card using the same die set because I like it so much. This time we're going to make a shaped card. A shaped card is a wonderful way to rethink your supplies and get unique looks, something different than a store-bought card. So I have a Noel shadow die cut here, and I'm putting some adhesive on the back center, and I'm gluing it onto a circle die cut. This circle is about 4 1/4 inches. You could use whatever size for whatever size card you want to make. And I'm gluing that right onto the front. Next, I die cut another Noel shadow from the same cardstock, and I'm putting score lines along the top edge of this with my scoreboard, about 1/4 inch from the top. You could do anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, but I did it right along those lines on the ends. I will now fold that back and forth, as this is just a little hinge so that our card can open and close and stand up nicely. All right, so I'm putting liquid adhesive above those score lines right on the front of this die cut. Then I'll take our other one and line it up so that it is adhered only along the top of the ends. Again, this creates our shaped card. So anytime you have a large die like this, you could probably do a shaped card. It could be even a large coordinating die, so maybe a large coordinating die for a large flower bouquet. You could do a shaped card from that too. All right, now I need a place to write a sentiment on the inside, so I have another circle. I'm putting glue on the front of that Noel. I'll line it up with the other circle up at the top and then close my card onto it, which will grab that circle. And now we have a circle inside of our card also for our personal greeting, and it lines up with the circle that's attached on the front. There are many ways you can form shaped cards. I just thought this circle behind the Noel gave it a little more strength and also a place to write a personal message. If you're like me and like to have a place on the back of the card to do your hand stamped by image, you can also glue a circle on the back, and that's where you could do that stamp. Now we can decorate this however we want. That red piece there is just a guide. It's 4¼ by 5½ inches. That's the size I want to stick to so that I can put it in a regular envelope. I have these little die cuts from the Concord 9th die set that I'll show you a little bit later. I just cut them from various colors of green cardstock, and I'm tucking them in the open spaces around the word Noel. This is an excellent opportunity to use 2 different die sets together so that you can get more use from them. For the openings in the word Noel, this time I used the little dies included and I cut them from cardstocks that I felt matched the project. So I didn't do the enamel shapes this time. I wanted to show you the cardstock looks just as nice. Now it's time to add some layers on top of the word Noel, which you could skip if you want to. But I have 1 layer of white cardstock and 1 layer of silver cardstock I'm going to put on top so that it has that dimension and shine. I tried to mix and match different cardstocks and metallic cardstocks on these 3 card examples. That's because I feel like if you're going to use a supply multiple times, changing up the colors keeps you from getting bored. I also changed up the size and shape of the cards too. So here you can see it stands up nicely on display, fits into a regular A2 envelope, and I also added some pool-colored pearls here and there because I love that sparkle and shine. This is a reminder to rethink your supplies and try a shaped card. If you do not have large dies like this one, you definitely can glue smaller die cuts together to create a shaped card, and I will link up here on the top right to a video showing some ideas for that kind of design. All right, let's move on to 2 cards here. These are done super fast with some really creative layering stencils from Concord 9th. There are 3 products here that can be purchased together or separately, and they can be used together or separately. We have a die set, a stamp set, and a layering stencil set. I actually used the dies on my last card. Now I'm going to focus on the layering stencils here. It's 1 set of layering stencils, but it allows you to create a wreath or a background. And it's fun because they designed it so that when you rotate the stencil, you can even build up more layers. So let me demonstrate the wreath first. As I mentioned before, I oftentimes will use a product kind of in an obvious way, how it was really intended to be used or with basic color combos or even the example the company provides. It allows me to get to know the product and it allows me to brainstorm while I'm creating of creative ways to use it. So here I'm just using the product as intended with basic holiday colors. So I'm applying a green ink over the first of the 3 wreath stencils, and I'm using Concord 9th inks. I'll put the colors on the screen. Once I've inked that up, this is really cool. You take the stencil and you rotate it 180 degrees, just swap it around, and now apply another green ink, and it lines up wonderfully. I think this is another one of the reasons I was excited about this release. I really appreciate it when these small businesses put in a lot of time and creativity so that we can make the most of the supplies we invest in. All right, now it's time for the next layer. This one I'll do in the darkest green, and it just adds detail to the leaves. Now we have our last stencil for the wreath, and we'll line this one up. I'll apply a softer red color first. Then we're going to do the same thing we did with the first stencil, rotate it 180 degrees, and do a darker red ink. What would be really fun to do here, and as I'm creating, I'm thinking about this, I could do like a red glitter paste over this, or I could do this whole card in maybe blues, maybe on a pool color note card, do white first for the leaves, and then add dark blues on top. Always thinking about the next way to use it, especially since it's so fast to use. Now for a sentiment on this, I used the new Concord 9th Festive Phrases stamp set and coordinating dies. I like that the coordinating dies cut out the large greetings, but also include a holly jolly and fa la la die cut and shadow. So you get a little more out of the combo. All right, so I used the Mary. I stamped it with black ink and used the coordinating die to cut it out, and I added it right into the center of our card. This is a pretty straightforward way to use these products, but I did step it up a bit by adding some little pearls and sequins as little red berries. And I used the die set that coordinates to cut from green glitter cardstock. And I glued that along the wreath just to have a little sparkle. It didn't take much time, but really steps up the card. And while I was creating this card, I was taking notes of my other ideas. And what I do is I write them on a Post-it note and stick them on the stamp set so that I can remember in the future. Like that I want to do this on a colored cardstock with some white inks and some glitter paste. And also that I want to make it look like a swag along the top and the bottom of my card by just splitting the wreath in half and flipping the pieces. So I think about those other ideas, and if I don't have enough time to do them while I'm creating in that little crafty session, I can remember them for future uses. I also use that Post-it note trick whenever I get a new stamp set. If I have any ideas right away, I put them on the Post-it note so I don't forget them. All right, before we move on, I do want to show you the other layering stencils included in the set. This one forms the background. So you put it down and apply one color, and like with the last one, you rotate it 180 degrees and apply another color. While I was doing this, I was thinking maybe I could use this for a spring or fall or summer card too. Really, the only leaves there that scream maybe holiday to me are the holly shapes. So what I could do is cover those with little flower die cuts or other die cut leaves. So really, you can stretch your supplies and try to make the most out of them by kind of hiding different elements that scream one season. All right, so now I have done the first stencils. Now it's time for the berries. Here you could use different colors. But again, I was testing this out, making this first card to get to know the products. So I usually go with a comfortable color combination, and I just did the same as last time. So I was able to quickly create this background. Now this creates a background with those 3 openings in the middle. That's so you can stamp like Deck the Halls or add die cuts like I did that says Let's Be Jolly. But if you wanted to put something else in the center, maybe a smaller rectangle die cut, you could then just have the background be kind of a frame around it, and you can have anything in the center. To spice it up a bit, I once again added some green glitter paper die cut leaves, some little confettis, and even some gold stars. Those really catch the light nicely, and I just filled them in some of the open areas. So again, this is like a basic use of the stencil set, but now I have a familiar feeling to it, and I know how I can change it up next time. All right, let's move on to our next card example, which is completely different. We're going to first start by stamping that background, and then we'll move on to creating that shaker element in the center. For that background, I'm using Concord 9th's newest Turnabout. It's a Plaid Turnabout. If you've never used Turnabout stamps, I'll link to a really complete video up here in the top right. But basically, you stamp it once, rotate your paper, stamp it again, and you do that 4 times to build up that plaid look. It's so beautiful and easy to do, especially this one. It's not tricky at all to line up. The Turnabout stamp comes with a guide. That's that clear piece there. We're going to take our stamp itself and line it up with the printing on the guide. You just look through the stamp to line it up. Now, there are many ways you can set up these turnabouts. I really encourage you to check out that video. I'm going to do a shortcut today. All right, so now the stamp is stuck to our guide. Now I'm taking a 6x6 piece of cardstock. That's the magic number, 6x6, and I'm lining it up so that the X on the guide, see that X right down the center of the guide, the X lines up with the corners of that background. So the ends of the X's line up with the corners on my 6x6 piece of cardstock. Lines up perfect. Then I'll hold those together, put that in the corner of our stamping tool, and close the door to grab the stamp. Now, here's the thing. You can use a jig to do this step, which my other video shows. I'm being a little lazy today and just using a 6x6 piece of cardstock, and I'll trim it down when we're done. All right, so now we start stamping. We have our paper in the corner, and I'm first stamping with Aqua Sky ink from Concord 9th, which is one of my favorites and needs to be re-inked. So I just ordered all the re-inkers. Now I'm going to stamp this, and I like to double stamp it just to make it a little more intense. That's one of the nice things about Concord 9th's inks is that you can stamp it multiple times to make it darker each time, but it doesn't bleed at all. It's just a great ink for that. So I rotated my cardstock 1 turn, and now I'm stamping it again with Sprout. You can see it's a light color at first, but then I can stamp it again to make it even darker, and you can keep going and make it as dark as you want. It gives you a lot of options for one ink. All right, after I'm happy with the results, I will take my cardstock and rotate it one more turn. So we'll turn it once again. And this time I'm putting down grapefruit ink. Now I'm just using 4 pretty colors from Concord 9th here. I was inspired by an example that Concord 9th had. Company examples are always a great place to start when you get to know a product. So I now have turned it one last time, and I'll stamp it with the final ink. So this is a pretty basic use of this stamp. But while I have everything set up, I'm going to create another background. Now, I'm not going to show the process. It's the exact same thing, but I'll tell you what I used for each of the 4 turns. The first time, I just used an aqua sky color that matched the background, so a soft tone-on-tone look. The second time, I used a slightly darker color. The third time, I actually glitter heat embossed, so I stamped it with Versamark ink and added glitter embossing powder. And then for the 4th and final one, I'm using white pigment ink. So I was able to kind of get a tone-on-tone look, which is completely different than our last example. While I had my supplies set up, I might as well create another project. Now this is just a background, and I'm actually not going to use it today, but I'm going to set it aside so the next time I need to create a quick card, I have it ready. That is one of the best ways to get the most out of your supplies. Okay, let's now create that element that will be on the front of this card. This features the new Concord 9th Winter Wonderland stamp set and coordinating die set. Now, this has lots of elements in it. There is so much packed into this die set and this stamp set that I wanted to show you some additional examples from Concord 9th. They said I could share them here. And we'll be using them on this card and another card later in this video. Now this die set allows you to create all of these different things here. You can do a snow globe, these little snowmen, snow people. There is a car, there are the snowflakes, and look at all these nutcrackers. I just think they're adorable. So you could use all of those dies to create a bunch of different scenes. You've got the snow globes, you could do a border on a card. You could even create a little snow globe shaped card or a little ornament. And it also includes, let me show you the die set again. There's that weird looking rectangle die over on the right of the screen. That rectangle die is used to make a pop-up feature inside of a card. See that example on the right from Concord 9th? It's a pop-up snow globe using this die set. So there's a lot packed into it. So I'm going to be able to use this in many ways. But for this first card, I thought I would stretch it even more and make a little shaker out of the snow globe. So first I'm going to start by creating the car. All of the dies are included in the set to allow you to create this cute little layered card. You just die cut from the different pieces of colored cardstock and then assemble them together. Sometimes I like to use a marker to color white cardstock. I'm running short on black cardstock, so I die cut from white and colored it with a marker. Here I colored the windows with a gray marker, did that right onto the white, then I can glue my die cut on top, and it looks like I used gray cardstock. That can be a definite time saver. Then we can glue the little tree on top, and look how cute that is. I like that the solid shape die is included, so you have a die cut that you can just glue all the pieces on top of, assembling it like a puzzle. Now let's create the stamp circle that will go behind our car. This one I'm stamping with that aqua sky color, the one that I mentioned needed to be re-inked, so I'm just stamping it a few times to make it darker. Then we're going to die cut this with the circle die. However, I'm not using the circle die that comes with the set. The circle die that comes with the set will line up with this perfectly and cut it out just right. That's the die you see here. However, I want to turn this into a shaker card, so I need a slightly larger circle die. So I am using the slightly larger circle die and cutting that out. So we have 2 circle dies here, the one that came with the die set and one that's slightly larger. I got the slightly larger one from one of my circle stacking die sets. Now I'm putting both of those dies together, taping them together onto a piece of white cardstock, and I'll run them through my die cut machine together. This will create a circle frame, and I'm going to glue this right on top of our little circle backdrop here. Now this is going to form the walls of our little shaker window. This is what I feel gives the best results when creating a shaker card, building up the walls by layering die cuts together. So I'm going to repeat that process 3 more times, cutting 3 more white frames by die cutting both of those circle dies at the same time. And I'll glue those together onto our backdrop. This will form the walls of our shaker window. We can now glue our little car right to the center and add any kind of shaker bits we want. I chose to use some tiny holographic stars, so I'll sprinkle those in. And I also chose to glue a few of those stars up in the sky so that those would stay put and not fall down when the card's standing up. I like to do that whenever I make a shaker window. I also chose to put in some clear micro beads. I'll link to the ones I use below. They are super duper tiny and they like to stick everywhere, I'll warn you, but I like them because they move around very freely and they don't all fall to the bottom when your card is standing up. Now we need an acetate window on top. This is the trick to die cutting acetate that's tricky to cut. You put a piece of cardstock onto your cutting plate, then your acetate, then the die. And you run that through your die cut machine. By having that piece of cardstock behind the acetate, it helps the die to be forced through the acetate, cutting it beautifully. I'm putting liquid adhesive right on the top of our stacked circle frames, and I'll put the acetate on top of that. Then we create 1 more of those circle frames and glue that on top for a finished look. So I was able to rethink this snow globe, which really was intended to just add on the front of the card or for a pop-up inside. I was able to rethink my supplies and create a shaker window from it. All I needed was 1 more additional basic circle die. That's one of the best ways to rethink and stretch your supplies, is to combine it with other things you have. All right, so I glued my little snow globe onto the front of our plaid background, and that's all on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I also added the bottom of our snow globe from silver cardstock, and I stamped a greeting on a white strip. You can see Lila over there. She just got home from school, so she's here to help me craft. And she agrees, creating a shaker card out of different supplies you have is one of the best things to do. She loves shaker cards. All right, let's move on to a completely different card style. And this is the type of card that I like to make when I'm not feeling very creative. This is the Concord 9th Poinsettia Quilt Top Die Set. It's very easy to assemble and it can be used creatively. So there is this large kind of faux stitch star shape and a shadow die, and then also some dies that create a bunch of faux stitch smaller pieces that you can add on top. And there is the word joy along with the shadow die. I really like the style of that. So here I'm starting with the piece of white cardstock and I'm scoring it in half and folding it. We're going to create a folded note card out of that shadow die. This is just a fun way to rethink this basic shape die. I am taping this onto the front of our folded piece, the creases on the left, and I'm making sure that the cutting edge of the die over on the left is hanging off the crease by a little bit. I then run it through my die cut machine, and look at that, we have a folded card. Now I'm taking the detail die that creates the faux stitching, and I'm taping it just to the front of the card. I'll run that through my die cut machine open, and that puts that faux stitching on the front of our card. I love this shape card. You could also just glue this right onto the front of a card panel, whatever you want, but I'm a big fan of the shape card. Now for me is the fun part, and that's adding these little die cuts on top of the background. You just follow the faux stitch lines and stack them in place. Now, this is what I like to do when I'm not feeling creative. I love to glue die cuts together. Now, everybody has a different thing they really enjoy doing, feel most comfortable doing. For some, it's coloring. For some, it's stitching. For some, it's stamping. Do whatever you feel most comfortable doing when you feel the least creative. This is the type of card I would make when I'm feeling not so creative and I'm trying to get my creative juices going. I would do a bunch of die cutting and assemble a card like this. I often find that when I'm doing something comfortable like this, I'm able to think of other things that I want to try or that I've been meaning to try, and it gets me inspired. Now this you could have just glued right onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card panel, but I just thought it was fun to do this shaped card that stands up nicely on display, yet still fits into a typical A2 envelope. All right, now let's move on to this card, which I had in my mind and was determined to make it with all of these little nutcrackers because I think they are the cutest things I have ever seen. I wanted to show you how I went about making all of these. It does take time to do a bunch of layered die cuts like this, but I enjoy, as I mentioned, the process of gluing them together. Here is something that I find really helpful. This is the Brutus Monroe Stick and Stamp Mat. It just has a nice sticky surface to it. I cut the solid nutcracker shapes from white cardstock, and I've stuck a bunch of them onto the sticky mat. The sticky mat holds them while we do everything we need to do to turn them into little nutcrackers. I find this very helpful instead of dealing with tiny little die cuts that keep moving around. So I cut that from white cardstock and added black in the areas where I needed black, because remember, I'm running short on black cardstock. Now over here on the left, I have white cardstock, and I'm coloring them with my Olo markers. I have a hard time finding different color skin tones in cardstock. So what I like to do is use skin tone markers on white cardstock and die cut from that. When I do a lot of die cutting like this, I do like to work in shifts. I like to do all of the die cutting of different colors at the same time and then glue them together. Here I'm making a few green ones, so I'm putting down all the first pieces, then I'll come in with all the next pieces. I do find it helpful to use a fine tip liquid adhesive like the one from Gina K. It really makes assembling these easy because you only need a little bit and you know it'll stay put. All right, so now I am adding the little faces on, and you can see how the black marker that I put down shows through. So that's why I ended up adding that black marker. All right, so I just went ahead and added all of the little die cuts to these guys. It took me a couple hours to do, but I love doing that. One of my favorite things to do. You could also color white die cuts to save some time. Here I'm adding some little gold baubles just for a bit of sparkle. Now I have all of my little nutcrackers assembled. I want to put them on the front of my card. I have a piece of scrap cardstock here that I'm taping down. That's where my sentiment will go. So I want to leave a gap there. I will now glue the little nutcrackers around that cardstock piece. I'm putting them at a diagonal for two reasons. One, I thought it'd be a fun card design. And two, I don't have to worry about keeping them straight. Whenever you work in a diagonal, it's much more forgiving, I guess you would say. While I'm doing this, which is a pretty easy thing to do, I'm thinking about the next card I can make with these supplies. What I plan to make next, and Lila's going to help me, is to create a bunch of snow people using the dies included in the set and have them lined up in the background with the same design. That'll be another way to use this design and use more of the supplies I have. All right, so once I have them all lined up and while they're drying, I will take that little strip out from the note card and I will stamp a sentiment in there. This is Joy to the World from the O Night Divine set that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. I stamped that with black ink, and now I will flip my card over and cut off all the extra pieces of the nutcracker from the edge. I will save those little pieces because I could use them on a future card too if I plan to do the same card design. Whenever I cut die cuts off the edge of a card, I do like to use a sanding block just to smooth it out a little bit. So this card took a lot longer than the other cards, but it's the idea I first had in my mind and I wanted to do it. Assembling these little die cuts is something I enjoy. So when you get a supply, you could either use it in a very basic way, maybe an idea from the website or another designer, to get comfortable with it and then come up with more ideas, or go with whatever your first idea is. In this case, it was these guys lined up in a diagonal. While I was doing it, I thought of more ways I could stretch this die set. I could do the little snowmen in the diagonal. I could do individual nutcrackers and add them at the center of a card, maybe in a shaker snow globe, or maybe on a little bobble so he kind of wiggles around. Many ways you can use it. And I think the best way to come up with ways to stretch your supplies is to just start creating. Okay, this last card is pretty quick to make, and I wanted to give you ideas of where to look for inspiration. All right, so this is the Concord 9th O Night Divine stamp set and coordinating die set that are available together or separately. What's really cool about this die set is these shapes over on the right have a little number stuck to the die, You can see the 3 there, which helps you to determine what order to glue those interesting looking shapes to form a background. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. You could also use these kind of stacked behind each other to create like a dimensional pop-up card. There are also other die shapes to create a nativity scene and so on, and the stamp set has some beautiful greetings that coordinate. As I had suggested many times in this video, I'm starting out with a pretty basic card design so I can get to know these supplies. And I'm just gluing each of the pieces down in order, because remember those dies are numbered. Now, this is where I wanted to recommend one of the best ways to get more from your supplies, and that is the internet. These small businesses do a lot of work to have a bunch of examples on their website and even on their packaging. They also have a bunch of designers who will do additional examples. That inspiration is free to you. So take it, use it, look around for other ideas. The easiest way to find ideas for a particular set is to go to the website and look on that product. They often have different suggested card designs on that product page. But an even better idea is to take the product name, in this example it would be Concord 9th Ode Divine, and do a Google search on that, and then click images. Up will pop lots of cards designed by different designers, and chances are you'll find something that inspires you. So in this case, there are so many ways you could use this set. If you go over to Concord 9th's website, you'll see lots of amazing examples. I'm just doing a pretty basic, simple design here, and pretty bold colors. I am stacking up some of these shapes for added dimension. So I have this uneven background, which I think really adds to the design. I stamped some of the greetings onto those hills in the background using tone-on-tone color inks. And I white heat embossed O Holy Night. I added the little nativity to the bottom and a gold die cut star at the top. The stars in the sky I used with a white gel pen. So this card design was inspired by an example on the Concord 9th website. So this is your reminder that the next time you want to rethink a product you have, the easiest thing you can do is go look at the company's website, for example, or Google that product name. All right, so there you have a bunch of cards that I was just really wanting to make because I love this release, along with some ideas on stretching your supplies. If you're interested, I have everything linked below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I will link to a couple other videos, and I think they might give you even more ideas for stretching your supplies. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon with another video.